Hey everybody, it's Paul Sizer here, and for this video I'm going to be talking a little bit about how I do cel-shaded coloring for the comic and illustration work that I do. This is one style of coloring. There's tons of ways to do it. This is the way that works best for me, that I've kind of cobbled together through years of coloring and looking at other artists, how they work, how other colorists work. And the main idea behind cel shading is simplification of showing shadows and shadow areas within a drawing that mimics the way that traditional cartoon, anime, and manga styles talk about how shading works and all that. So rather than using a more painterly or gradated type of shadowing, you're using and making shadows that have hard lines that are a little more graphic looking and have a certain feel and style that I like to work with. So this video is going to be kind of a starting point, and I'm going to show you a few things, and then we'll go on to a little more advanced techniques in following videos. But what I'm gonna focus on tonight is going to be showing you about flatting colors, and then also kind of figuring out the contouring of cel shaded shadows within a drawing as well. Kind of how I think about that and how it works. So what we're looking at here is line work from the illustration I did for my current Science Builds the Future poster. And this is my black and white line work. It's the black and white ink work. And I tend to work as an inker is kind of like very clean line inking. I don't use a lot of cross hatching or sketchy ink lines. I like to have very clean, fluid lines that have thick and thin in them. But I also like to make shapes that are nice, clean, closed shapes. So the kind of coloring that I'm going to be showing you works well with this style of drawing. Other kinds of inking would kind of require different ways of approaching color. So, like I said, this is kind of built to accommodate and enhance the type of inking that I have here. So the first thing I'm going to do is flatten my colors in. So flattening colors just means that I'm going to be dropping in solid tones to the main areas of this drawing. And once I have flat colors in there, then those are things that can be easily selected and easily added to or edited. Now I'm going to be using two tools predominantly here. I will be using my pencil tool, and I have that set to darken. The reason I have it set to darken is because when you have a color loaded up with pink here, your pencil loaded up with a color is always going to overwrite every single color that it's on top of. So against the white, that seems fine, but if I go over the black, that pencil color goes over the black. It supersedes the black that is beneath it. So it doesn't stay out of the way of the black. It just goes on top of it. So if I have my pencil set to darken, that color loaded into that tool will darken anything that's lighter than it, but it will not mess with anything that is darker than it. So if I draw over my black, you can see that it's not messing with the black lines at all. It's just affecting things that are lighter, in this case the white. So I'm going to have my paint bucket tool, which will be the other tool that I'll be working for this portion of the demo, and I have that set to darken as well. So again, as I fill things in, it will fill in the lighter than the color spaces, but it will not mess with anything that's darker. So it's darken is a way that I can kind of keep the color from having any effect or doing anything to the black and white line art that I have until I want to deal with that further along in the drawing. So let's go ahead and start putting the flatting in for this. So I'm going to pick out, I've got my skin tone collection here, and I'm going to pick a dark skin tone for her. Let's start there. And since I'm looking at this, like I said, since my inking, I'm looking to see if there's any kind of gaps or any places that if I do a contiguous paint bucket fill, if it goes any place, it's not going to go outside of where I want it to. So there's a couple of closed off areas here, like in these strands of hair, that I could go in and fill with the paint bucket tool, but sometimes I find it just simpler to take my, if I'm working with a stylus and can do it just as easily, I kind of like going in and just filling in those areas that are just little fussy areas with my brush or pencil. So I can pick up the little stray pixels that maybe have gotten kind of cleaned up there. And I'm going to have her visor be kind of a blue color, so I will start out, I'll go this little less intense blue. Same thing, I've got solid shapes here that I can paint bucket fill. This blue is against her skin, so it's going to be this tone. This blue that's out here, I'm going to make that just a tiny bit lighter because it doesn't have her skin tone behind it, so it'll be blue, but a little slightly lighter blue than the blue that's against her skin. And go ahead and, while we're flatting here, just sort of get the tech all a consistent color. I'm using, if I'm coloring or doing things with the tech on a piece, a lot of times I'll just sort of drop that all into the same color. It's just sort of a holder color, so all of the stuff like that. While we're in this neighborhood, yeah, let's get a gold color for her earring. So the other option that I have here, and I'll go ahead and move this over here, is I've got these white lines that are indicating the highlights in her hair. So I'm going to go ahead and pick out a very dark, kind of steelish blue-gray that I'm going to fill those in with. And again, I can do that with the paint bucket tool, but as I said before, sometimes it's just simpler for me to go in with my pencil tool set to darken and just kind of fill those in by hand, just to give me a little change of pace. I find sometimes that as I'm drawing, it's just kind of nice to kind of quickly do things by hand, move the arm around so you're not cramping up. And it's just also easier too, because especially with tapered lines like this, a lot of time there'll be kind of like closed off pixels on the end that just don't fill in. So to me, it's just sometimes a lot faster just to kind of, in a controlled way, just kind of go and kind of do these all as one big thing. And because I'm using a stylus, I've got control. I can use this big brush here, but I can control my pressure on the stylus and be able to control the fatness of that point. Of the point of the brush, or the width of the brush. So, kind of go in there. Yeah. So there. So that was a quick fill in with that. So, at this point now, we've got what I would say are the basic tones flatted in for this picture. Basic skin tone, and then tone for this visor area, and for all this. So now the next thing I'm going to do is kind of determine where my light source is, and then begin to place my shadows and the edges of my shadows. So just for the purpose of this, I kind of mentally do this, but for the purpose of this demo, I'm going to put a little arrow here just to kind of remind us where the direction of the light is that I'm going to be using for this particular drawing. So everything that's obviously closer to the light source will be the highlights, and everything that is away from the light source will be where the shadows lay. So for me to pick a color for the shadows, what I will do is once you have a pen or a pencil tool or brush tool, you can always hit your option key to get the eyedropper tool. So I'm going to select the color that I have chosen for her skin, and I'm going to go down to the color picker, and I'm going to select from that a slightly darker version of that, so I can kind of visually make a decision looking at what the current color is, what the shadow would be for that. So that seems to be a kind of pleasing enough of a difference that it looks visually correct. So let's make the pencil a little thinner here. So what I'm going to do now is determine kind of the edges of the shadows that will fall along her face. So as I make these edges, these are going to be lines that will be curvilinear because I'm going to be pulling that shadow along the contour of her head, which is a dimension, it's a rounded surface, so I'm going to use rounded lines to mimic that surface. And I'll visually kind of continue that down here. This will be the back part of her face, so I'm going to pull that line so that it follows the contour of her jaw, and then as that goes down to the base of her chin. So her ear is going to have a highlight on it, but it is matching up to this shaded area that I've established for the back of her face. So since the ear is kind of a different plane, I'm going to kind of cordon off this area here by just making a line that kind of segregates the ear from the rest of her jaw and neckline here, which will fall into shadow. And let's view up here. So as I said, in the same way as I'm determining where shadow lines are going to fall, I'm going to do it by following the contour of the shape of her earlobe. So again, these are rounded lines that will be establishing those edges. Same thing here, that's basically what I want. I can also sort of rope off areas that I want to still maintain within a shadow where there might be a highlight, like against her neck, the neckline that she has here. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of go and pull a small area here that would be a highlight that I want to maintain. And while I've got the color here, I'm also going to make my brush a little smaller and pull the shadows that will fall along her nose here. So along the nostril, the top, the base of her nose, so that connects to the nostril area there, along the back of the nose, have that kind of go on that edge there, and then I'm going to have a little bit of a cast shadow from her nostril and connect that up to her face here. So there's going to be shadows that exist within this blue area that are beneath the mask, and I'm going to use the lines that I'm establishing here to inform where those lines are going to go. But let's go ahead and kind of drop in our shade areas here with the paint bucket tool. So let's move back. So right now I've got the edges of the shadows that are going to be on her face. Go to my paint bucket tool. And I'm just going to start filling those in. There we go. So again, there's just some stray areas in there that the contiguous fill of the paint bucket did not catch. So I'm going to go ahead and just, again, clean those up, get in there. A little smaller brush, kind of clean the edge of that up, make that look a little more pleasing. So this is I want to have her top lip be a little bit in darkness too, a little bit deeper in shadow, but you notice that this is not a closed shape, so if I use the paint bucket tool to fill that in, it would just fill her entire face. So what I'll do is I will use the pencil to close off that with color rather than with a black line. So go ahead and do that, and then that will allow me to paint bucket fill, and it will stop it there. In the same way, I could also, if I want to have that bottom lip also be have an edge there, I can also just do that with color rather than a black line. And same thing, if I wanted to have some highlights in there, I could kind of, again, segregate off some areas that when I fill, then are left as highlights. All right, so as I said, these shadows also are going to be affecting her face beneath the mask here. So I'll just be doing the same thing that I just did, but I'll be doing it with a different color. So I'm going to go ahead and select my blue tone there to get that sample with the HiDropper tool. Go here and sort of find the darker version of blue that I want to use for the shadowing under there. That looks okay. And as I said, I've established kind of the shadow lines that are being determined by what I've already done out here on her skin. So I'm going to kind of mirror those and just kind of visually continue them as they extend underneath this clear blue plastic. So kind of do that. This one here, kind of ramp that up there. I'm going to want her eyelid to be lighter. So I'm going to kind of, again, with color, segregate that area off so that it doesn't fill in. I'm going to draw a line there so that that keeps the bridge of her nose light. The shadow falls across there. And there's probably going to be a little bit of a cast shadow beneath. Her forehead will be colored here, but I'm going to just make a little closing line there so that the shadow goes there. So that should be pretty close. Let's go ahead and fill those areas in. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. All right. And with anything like this, again, you're setting up the rules of how shading works. So as you go, there's going to stuff you're going to plan for, and there also are going to be things like, for instance, up here, I kind of noticed that there might be like a cast shadow from the visor, so just sort of a slight fill there. Yeah. So again, we're just laying in these base tone areas for how this is going to go. Again, let's zero in on that ear. I'm going to, again, select with my eyedropper tool, and I want to have some of the cast shadows from her earlobe here. There'd be a slight cast shadow from this cord that's here. And again, every shape that I'm doing, every form that I'm doing, every time I'm making an edge of a shadow, it's in service of showing the contour of the surface that it's going across. So there's not really going to be any literally straight lines here. All of these lines are organic. They all flow with the way that her face, so we're looking at the under structure of her face, the planes of her face, and those shadows are laying across those and giving us information about the volumetric feel of that particular form. So yeah. So as I said, this is something that with these are still all flat tones, which means they are all still selectable tones. meaning that if I want to, I can now make individual selections and make changes. So for instance, if there was something that I wanted to do overall in coloring this piece with, say, like a flesh tone, if I wanted to change the tone of the brown or something like that, it's very simple for me to do. And what I can do is go to my magic wand tool, and I can select that brown color, and you see that it goes and it selects all instances of the brown of her skin. And I can alter that either by just picking another color or making an adjustment to it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick a different brown for my skin tone collection here. I want to have a little bit more yellow, a little more rich brown interface. So I can select that, and since this is an active selection, I can just simply go and fill with that foreground color. And then consequently, if I then want to adjust the darkness of the shadows that I had, same thing, I can universally select those shadows, and in the same way that I picked the shading from that base color, since the color that I just made her skin is still loaded in my color picker, I can now go and just make a deeper version of that here. And then the same thing, go to fill and foreground color, boom. Command D to deselect. So there I was able to make a universal quick color change because I had flat selectable colors. I can do that if I wanted to make a difference with her visor or anything like that. That could happen as well. So for this section here, I'm going to do one more volumetric thing. And again, this is something that I learned from watching Adam Hughes color, who is one of the preeminent master comic artists in the world today. And his suggestion was that to make eyes look more volumetric so that they look like they are a rounded form inside the eye socket, anytime you have an eyeball, take a very light gray color and a slight shade on that will help to make that eye look round so it doesn't look like a flat white glass eye, that it actually looks like it has some volume. And then in intent, this is showing the little bit of a cast shadow from the upper eyelid, the lashes and stuff like that. So again, this curvilinear line helps to establish that you're mapping it along a rounded object. All right. So this is a flatted out cel-shaded image, and that's the end of this video. So next video, I'm going to talk with you a little bit about some other ways to deal with highlights, using some of the other tools for creating those highlights, what the options are, and also doing color holds on the black lines to convert black lines into lines that are in color. So thanks for watching, and I will be back next time with a few more coloring tips. So be alert, be kind, draw every day, and I will talk to you later. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.